Hello everyone, my name is Andrea and I'm the Socialization Technician at IPHES, which is a research center that studies prehistory. Today I'm going to be talking about art in the open air, more specifically about Upper Paleolithic portable art, which is the art they would take with them around when they were moving from place to place. And the Upper Paleolithic is the period where Neanderthals are now extinct and it's modern humans living in Europe, people just like us. So I will concentrate on the portable art they did in Europe. There are some beautiful examples from other parts of the world, but I don't have time to copy them today. Now, before we start, I wanted to talk about the type of art that we usually associate when we talk about prehistoric art, which is usually what we have in mind is these beautiful drawings in caves, beautifully drawn and beautifully painted. Now, these drawings are made in very deep caves, usually, where the paintings have been preserved. They are places where you would have needed a light or a sort of lamp to be able to see them. But Stone Age people didn't live in these sort of caves. They would have been really wet, humid, and cold. Instead, they lived in what we call rock shelters, which would be at the front of the caves or in a not very deep rock crevice where they would find some shelter, or in open air camps, like the one you see here represented, which is a reproduction of Gunnersdorf camp. Now, when they are living in these camps, they also like to make art. And usually the type of art they make is either in the art engravings in the cave of the rock shelter, or they will make portable art that they would carry with them. The art that we see in caves is probably something that they went there to do. It is a place where they went to make the art, and maybe a type of community art. If you think about community art today, that's what we would see in museums, churches, outside in sculptures, things that we do that we share all together. They usually represent our culture. Now, instead, when we look at the type of art that we would carry around with us all the time, we think about jewelry, we can think about things that you would use to decorate our desk or to decorate our shelves at home. There's a different type of art that is more personal. Maybe it tells more about yourself and your day-to-day life. Now, it is not a one-to-one comparison with the Stone Age because these are groups that are moving around all the time. So they will make art that is community art, but it's made in a way that is portable and they can carry with them. Some of it, though, will be this type of art that it will be more personal and it tells a little bit more about their own personal life-to-life story. So I wanted to look at that to be able to see into the lives of Stone Age people through the art. Now, before I start talking about the art, a little disclaimer. When we talk about art, we're talking about culture. And we're talking about a culture that is not around anymore. They didn't leave any sort of writing that we can understand. So it's all hypothesis, it's all speculation. We do not have any hard evidence, any hard facts about what the art really meant or represented to them. So I will be going through some examples of art. I will be sharing with you some of the ideas that some of the archaeologists have come up with. You can come up with your own ideas as well, and they might be as true and as correct as the ones that archaeologists have, which means we have no proof or no evidence that any of them are correct or incorrect. But let's try and look at the art and see what we can get. Now, before I want to talk about who are the artists of this art. Now, traditionally, when archaeologists looked at the evidence, there was a little bit of a bias on what gender the person that made that artifact was. There was the presumption that anything made out of hard material, such as rock or bone, would require a lot of strength to do. Also, the type of tools that were made with bone and stone were usually tools related to hunting or butchering animals. So it was always assigned to men. while more delicate things such as needles, maybe even fish hooks, nets, or things made of more perishable materials were associated to women, softer materials. Now, that already biased the amount of evidence that was described from each gender, because you can imagine that softer, more delicate, or perishable materials are not going to survive as much. But on top of that, there is a problem with that presumption, because when we look at the ethnographic record, we can see that 90% of hunter-gatherers, women, hunt as much as men. They have their own stone toolkit and weapons, and they repair and make it themselves. You can imagine that if they are going to use tools, even if it is for recollection or for making things that they would need on the day to day, or even for what was presumed to be their job, like for making and repairing needles, if they had to wait for a man to be able to do that for them to be able to continue their job, wouldn't be very feasible. They would have probably to stop working and wait for a long time. So they were able to make it themselves. We have the evidence as well in the archaeological record. We have found some burials of women which were presumed to be men originally because they were found with weapons. They were found not only with the weapons and stone tools, but also the tools to make more and repair them, which is why they had been assigned male until looking at them more carefully, they realized that they were actually female. So we should probably reassess who were the artists in based on that information. It could probably be either men or women. It could be anyone. One example that I really like related to that is linked to that little image of the head of a woman that you have at the very end. Now, this is the head of the Dolní Věstonice, which is a site in the Czech Republic, and it's made of ivory. Now, when they found it, they also found a burial of a woman that was presumed to be very high ranking because it was covered in ochre, it was very richly decorated, and it also had animals buried with hair. Now, what's interesting is that the archaeologists that studied the burial, they also mentioned that they saw a slight asymmetry on the cranium of the woman. And later on, this head was found, which seems to also have this slight asymmetry. So some people thought that maybe she was the artist that made this head. She was making a self-representation. I have been asked before how she would have been able to see herself without a mirror, but there are many reflective areas where she could have seen herself and then represented her in the piece of ivory. It's not very detailed either, so she doesn't need to see all the very delicate, intricate details of her face. Now, this is one possibility. The other thing that it shows us is that this was a very high-ranked woman. Even if another person made this head, it shows the level of importance that woman, or at least this woman, had in her group, which challenges some of the previous ideas of archaeologists. Now, looking at archaeologists' bias, another issue that we have is the materials that they use to make the art. Now, they use bone, they use rock, they use plant materials, anything that they would find outside. Now, the problem is the plant materials. They are perishable and they are not usually found in the archaeological record. We find an explosion of art in the late glacial maximum, which is a period when it got so cold that a lot of the forests and the trees that were in Europe died out, replaced by plains and tundra. Now, it could be that there is truly an explosion of these artistic cultures, or it could be that they were making art previously out of perishable materials, and now that they don't have as many trees around, they start using other materials such as rocks and bones. So we start finding a lot more art made of those materials that survive to today, and we can see. So that is another issue that archaeologists have. And a lot of these day-to-day art that we would carry around that would tell about our story and ourselves would probably be made of these perishable materials because it's easier to make and easier to fix and change. And if we think about the things that we have, like our jewelry and things, they usually don't last forever. We are changing fashions and changing things all the time. So that is another problem that we have to be able to interpret that part of the Stone Age people's life. Now, I will start by looking at rock art, such as the community art that they have in the caves that we mentioned at the beginning, that we can see as well outdoors. They will use rock slab, like this one's from Molida South, which is a site here in Tarragona, which is made in schist, and they just carve some drawings. You can even see a little bit of traces of color, even though they have disappeared due to the being outdoors. Some of them could have been painted as well. We find examples of these in many places. We also find drawings, engravings in flat rocks that they would find outdoors, like cliffs and walls and things like that. This one is quite interesting though, because a lot of these schist plaques, they basically draw animals and similar things that they're drawing in the caves. But in this one, you have this strange drawing of these little sort of hut-like shapes. And I think maybe they're drawing their campsite, which would be something that they don't draw inside the cave. So it shows you a slight difference on what they're drawing when they are outside and when they are doing it inside the cave, and tells you a little bit about their life in the campsite, how many huts they would have maybe, or what it would look like. And actually, you can see a little recreation of what they think the digital reconstruction of the thing Mulita South may have looked like. Now, before I start looking at some of the more intricate art that we usually relate to this prehistoric art, I wanted to stop to talk about the ornaments. Hannah has previously talked about the importance of ornamentation in Neanderthals, so I wanted to continue with the modern humans, the Homo sapiens. And truly, they love their fashion and they love their decoration. We have found very intricate hats decorated with shells and bones, bells, coats, loads of different things that they would have worn. Now, here on the left, you can see the shells that were decorating the garment of a young child that was buried in the site of La Madeleine. There were over 1,000 shells, and they found about 186 needles, because needles are very thin and delicate, so they can sew these little shells on the garments. They would break quite often, so they needed quite a lot. Archaeologists have calculated that it would have taken 30 hours just to sew those shells on the garment. So that's a lot of time that they're spending decorating these clothes for this child. And that doesn't include the time they would take to collect the shells, which come from many places, some of them miles away. How much time it would take to pierce those shells. I have tried that before, and it's quite hard. It takes a little bit of pressure on your fingers, and it's very easy to break the shells, which would make you start over again. So I can imagine a lot of patience and a lot of time spent on this. I have put another example from the Sungir burial where you can see the sort of decorations that he would have in his clothes, which shows us as well that the types of garments they're wearing, they are not the Flintstones clothes that we imagine, like grabbing a piece of animal skin and tying them around the shoulder. No, they are truly making fashionable clothes, they're making shoes, they're decorating them, they're spending time. So they like to look good, they like their fashion, they are truly people like us, so they probably express themselves on their clothes as much as we do. Now, apart from the ornamentation, we also have a type of functional art. So like today, things that we use every single day, we like to make them ours. We like to personalize them. So if you think about your smartphone, usually everyone has a case, and you like a case that's it's a beautiful color, or maybe you will put some stickers on it, or you decorate your backpack when you go to school. People decorate their backpacks. make them a little bit more personal. And that's probably something they also did back then. We find some objects that they would carry around all the time that they decorate. The examples I have here are from atolls. Now, the atoll is the spear thrower that they use to throw their spears. You can see a recreation of wood that would look like here on the right. Now, the spear might break. The tip of the spear, they used to replace them quite often. So if they decorated those, maybe they did it in wood, but we don't find many of them. However, we do find their atlatls, which are made of bone. You use them again and again and again, and they do some very intricate art on them. The one on the top, you can see a hyena they've carved on it, or at least that's what archaeologists say. I can see it's an animal. I'm not sure what animal it is. The one at the bottom is my favorite though. It's a little fawn, a young deer, and on the bottom of it, there's something coming out. Now, the little thing at the tip at the very end, it's recognizable as a bird because it has a wing on it. However, the thing that's coming out of its boom, well, it's not as clear. Some people think it's a poo. Some people think it cannot be a poo because that's not the shape of deer poo, and they were very knowledgeable about that in the Stone Age. So they think it might represent a bird sack instead. But either way, it is telling a story, and it is telling a fun story, a little bit of a joke. The deer looking back at this bird on top of his birding sack of poo, like thinking, what the hell are you doing there? So it shows a sense of humor, it shows a little bit of personality in whoever had this atlatl. Now, looking forward to music. Now, music would have been an intricate part of the human history, probably from the very beginning. Some people think that we use music for communication and musical sounds before speaking. And the reason why we think that is because some primates do. Some primates use different tones, and as you have chimpanzees drumming on trees to communicate certain things before, maybe before humans had language, they did similar things. Now, a lot of the things that can make music are perishable. If you think about instruments today, a lot of them made of wood and bamboo and things like that would not survive to today. But we start seeing quite a lot of instruments that do from this time period. Again, it could be just because the late glacial maximum, they have to find other materials to make their instruments. Now let's have a look at some of them. On the very left, we have these flutes that are made with the bones of birds, which are hollow and make beautiful sounds. Next to it, at the very bottom, we have three whistles. Now, they may have been used to create music, or they may have been used as part of hunting or some activity they are doing. And actually, the one on top of that is also a little bit of that. It's a bull roarer, which when you spin it on a cord, it makes a sort of guttural sound. So some people think it might have been part of a musical ritual or musical sort of event, but some people think it may have been used in hunting to scare animals in a certain direction to be able to hunt them easier. We don't know, but what you can see in this bull is that it is also beautifully decorated and it has traces of pigment on it as well. So it is a piece of art on itself. The other two on the side are quite interesting as well. The one on the top that has the notches, we know it was used as an instrument. You would grab a stick and move it around to create different tones. And we know that because if you look at the very top, you can see the notches are sort of like eroded from moving a stick back and forth. And the one underneath it is a mouth bow. So basically, it's a bit like a bow for a bow and arrow. You would string it with a cord, and then you would put it on your mouth, and you would open and close your mouth to create the different tones. So they're all different types of instruments that they would have used in the Paleolithic, which is a different type of art that was definitely a part of their life. Now then we've got the most famous portable art, which are the sculptures known as Venus figurines. They have had many different interpretations throughout the time. Originally, they were thought to be sort of like pornography in a way, mainly because of their nudity. They were also seen as representation of beauty standards of the time, so the Venus, the beautiful figures of the Stone Age. They were also seen as fertility figures because a lot of them look like they are pregnant. Now, I always say to be careful with all of these interpretations. The first one's obviously nudity probably didn't mean the same to them that it does to us. Also, the idea of them being beauty standards and things like that means that they're being done for men, which is most archaeologists that looked at them originally were men, so their interpretations were from their point of view. But we always have to think about that there are other people in the Stone Age apart from men, so they may not have been done for men. And actually, I will come to a theory that will look a little bit into that. But first, I want to mention about the last one, the fertility one. And it could be that they're fertility figures. However, I always mention that we have to bear in mind that in our culture, fertility was considered very important because we are, after all, a Neolithic culture. So that means the more children we have, the more hands we have to work the field, the more food we will have eventually. So that means that having more children means being richer, having a better life. However, in the Paleolithic for hunter-gatherers, that is not the case. The more children you have, the less food you have, and the more in danger you are because you have to take care of these very vulnerable individuals. So fertility may have been different for them than it is for us. They could still be fertility figures, but we have to be careful about those interpretations as well. So like I said, I'm going to go and spin it around a little bit and give you a theory that looks from the female point of view. Now, that doesn't mean that this is the true theory. It's just to give you a different perspective. Now, this theory comes from McCoy and McDermott. They basically saw that the Venus figurines are not proportionate if you would look at them face front, like you would make a figurine of a woman as you see a woman looks like. They were all sort of not, they didn't have the correct proportions. The top was very big, then the legs and the feet almost disappeared. They were very small, and the heads as well were very small in proportion to the rest of the body. So what they thought is that the proportions made sense only if it was done from the perspective of a woman looking down at herself. So they thought, could they be images of self-representation of women basically sculpting their own body, what they see on the little sculpture? Now, with that representation, they also noticed that all these different Venus figurines are not from the same period of their life. Some of them are prepubescent women, some of them are pregnant women, some of them are women with the menopause. You can see in some of them, like the only vestige, they've got a line at the bottom of the stomach where the uterus is that forms when you get to the menopause. So it would show these different stages in the life of a woman. And they thought that maybe these figurines were done for women. They were done by women for other women to teach them about the changes of their body. A lot of us that have gone through the pandemic and through COVID, we've noticed how any changes in our life completely changes our bodies as well, and how important noticing those changes would have been in the Stone Age, especially if it's related to childbirth. Because like I said, it was quite dangerous to be pregnant in the Stone Age, especially if you're going to do a trip that's miles long. So maybe you won't do that trip if you really notice those changes in your body and you realize that you're pregnant. And McCoy and McDermott noticed that during this period, there's sort of like an explosion of population. So they think they might be linked this more awareness of their bodies and these Venus figurines with this explosion of population. Now, this is just a theory, but I want to share it with you. Now, also in the Venus figurines, we notice that if you look carefully at them, they're not actually completely naked. They have some fabric on them, they have some hats, they have some strange skirts or tops as well. And all of them look something like it's woven. Now, Sulfur actually argued that maybe this is something that women used to do, that women were weavers in their communities. And as women being the weavers, it was a thing that connected all women, a place of community for women where they would share their stories, they would share their own experiences, and maybe it was something that united them and was part of their own unique culture as a woman. And maybe that's, if these Venus figurines were done for women, maybe that's why this was represented in the Venus figurines. Maybe, maybe not, but it's an interesting idea. Now, talking about these different perspectives and the idea of them being pornography and which one of it, of fertility figures and ritual goddesses and things like that. Recently, they found that in Dolly Nature, one of the Venus figurines, there is the fingerprint of a child, which I think it sort of reinforces the idea that they were not just for adult men. They may have been for children as well. They may even have been sort of toys for them to play with and imagine different stages of their life. Who knows? We don't really know. Now, talking about women, there's another type of portable art, which is these bones that have little notches on them. This one is the Shamgar bone, which had been considered the oldest calendar of men. Now, Zaslavsky argued that it wasn't the oldest calendar for men, but it was the oldest calendar for women, since the notches are all in sets of 28 to 30, which, yes, is the lunar calendar, but there is a gender that needs to know when 28 to 30 days have passed, and it's not men, it is usually women. And it is not unique. There are many different bones and teeth and things that we find that have those same notches from 28 to 32. And as women, we know that our ovulation periods, they sort of change between those ranges. Even today, in the ethnographic record, we can see many cultures that still continue to do a sort of tracking of their ovulation by doing little notches. There is, for example, a group tribe that what they do little knots on their skirt, so they can count that way. They can count the knots that they have been doing. So it's something that is very plausible that they would have done as well in the Stone Age. Now, there is also the male counterpart, so don't worry, men, there is a little bit for you as well. Now, these are different types of sculpture, but Angulo and Cuesta, which are two researchers, one of them a gynecologist and one of them an archaeologist who looked at this sort of portable art, they noticed that there is sort of also an education in these. You can see at the very top, there's like an engraved one. Now, according to them, this is showing a problem that can happen, which is called phimosis. And a lot of these, they say, are circumcised, which would be a solution for that problem. So it's sort of also teaching something to men as well. It could be that they're just representations again of fertility or different rituals or religions, or it could be all of them. It could be that they are also functional. Who knows? Now, finally, some different types of sculptures. Now, these type of sculptures are made of ivory, usually mammoth tusks, and a lot of these were found around Germany and the Czech Republic and sort of Eastern Europe. Now, the one on the very left is the Lion Man, very famous representation, which looks a bit like a man with the head of a lion. You also have the little figurine of a mammoth and the little figurine of a horse. Now, all of these animal representations are very interesting. Now, on the very right as well, you've got a little man. Men represented in sculptures are very, very rare. So this is a very unique figurine. It was found in a burial in Brno. Now, the burial has been categorized as the burial of a shaman. Again, we do not know, but it was a very richly decorated burial. And the man buried in there seems to have had some problems on its articulations of being able to move its body. It may have had some sort of disease that seems to have started in childhood. Now they think this little puppet may actually have been articulated. So it could have been given to him as a votive to help him feel better. It could have been something that he had as a toy from when he was young till he was an adult. We don't really know, but it is quite interesting. They also think it would have been wearing clothes, such as the representation you can see at the very right. It shows the possibility of having dolls and toys similar to the ones we have today. And actually, all of these things, they could be votives and they could be for rituals and things like that, but they could also be children's toys. A lot of these are very similar to the ones that children play today, and they may have used them in the Stone Age. But finding things for children or used by children that tells you the life of children in archaeology is very, very hard. So what's the archaeology of children like? Now, it's very difficult to be able to look into children. You can look at the skeletons of children and burials of children, although they are very rare. They can tell you a little bit about the lives of children, what they were eating, how they were growing up, but it doesn't tell you a lot about their own day-to-day life and what their lives were like. Were they always working and learning for their survival, or did they have some time to play? Now, we do have some clues. There were some footprints found in La Garma of children between 4 and 10 years old, sort of running around the cave. Some people think that they may have been playing tag. So it shows you that maybe children did group together and maybe did some playtime. In ethnographic records, hunter-gatherers today, children do play, and it is very important for learning skills as they are growing up. And actually, a lot of them will have toys that are similar to what the grown-ups use, such as tiny bow and arrows and tiny spears that they will use around their camps to try and practice against bugs and little things. And as they grow up, they'll start to join the adults in their tasks to learn more directly how to do all of those tasks. But they learn through play. They learn playing and having fun as children do. Now, these are some objects that have been found in the archaeological record that could be interpreted as toys as well. My favorites are these ones, the rondelles, which are discs made of the scapular bone of animals, and they draw images on each side. And when you spin, you can see a sort of story. You can see this one here of the deer running, which really looks like the deer is running, isn't it? And you can see the notches at the top, the triangles, to see exactly how they have to place those legs. So it actually works as a thaumatrope. You can see another two examples here of an adult bison and a baby bison. So you can see the change between baby and adult. And there's another little bit more gruesome here of a man that has met a bear and has ended not very well for him. So all of these could be sort of ways to distract children or parts of a storytelling event that they would perform for children and for other people. But remember, children were around in the Stone Age and children were not very different to children today. They would have been impatient, they would have needed to be distracted, you would have needed to do something for them so they wouldn't run off and maybe get killed by a hyena or a lion. It's quite dangerous in the Stone Age, so definitely things like that would have probably existed, toys, games, activities to play with the children and distract the children. Another example I put in here is one from North America. So this one is not from Europe. The tiny little llamas are made with twig. And I put them in here because a lot of children's toys would have been made of these perishable materials, such as these llamas. It's the easiest thing to use to make them, and you can give them to the children while they're young and they can throw them away, and it doesn't matter. It's nothing that has taken you a lot of time and is very valuable. Some of them might be made of those more durable materials, but most of the time, things for children, they're made of cheap materials, so they use them, they throw them away, they lose them, it doesn't matter. And so there's a lot of the story of children as well as for women and men, for everyone that may have been lost because of the use of these perishable materials. So hopefully in the future, as we learn more and discover more things, we can fill up this story. But there's still a lot of gaps in the story. We will never know 100% the truth. Like I said at the beginning, this is a different culture. So there's no way we can ever understand every single thing about this culture. Even if they were around to tell us, it would probably be very difficult for us to understand why they did some things. So just to keep an eye, to keep a mind open, and when you look at portable art, think about the person and maybe the life that they had, and you can come up with your own stories. It's always nice to come with your own stories and put a face to the Stone Age people and remember that they were not that different from us. I hope you really enjoyed this talk, and thank you very much. As this talk, as I mentioned, has been part of Ice Age Europe Day, which we have done in collaboration with Creswell Crafts, where I used to work. So they are my colleagues. So if you want to see the other two talks that Anharad and Hannah have done, you will find them in the Patreon of Creswell Crafts. Hannah has talked about Neanderthal art and ornamentation. So you see a very fascinating aspect of Neanderthals that has very recently been discovered and changing the whole view of Neanderthals that we have. And Anne Harad, who is a paleontologist, has been looking at marks that are left on bones but are not made by humans but made by animals. Some of them have sometimes been assumed to be made by humans mistakenly and been done instead by other animals. It's also a very fascinating talk as well. In there, you also have a lot more talks from previous events that we had, and also other talks that Creswell Crafts does every week. So I think there's over 50 talks in there. If you like prehistory, you can have a look at that. But thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the talk, and I hope you had fun with me. Bye.